The story within the story structure did make writing and directing this a bit more complicated, but it was also a lot of fun because I wound the stories together so that they started to feed and fuel each other.
I play two roles. One character is Edward, the writer of the book that Susan's reading. And then I also play Tony, the character in the book.
I wanted the audience to begin to connect the two and realize, aha, he's playing both roles. What's he saying here? It is a story that Edward has written about himself, and Susan visualizes it as such.
He's had his heart broken. He's had this love that he's had for this woman just torn from him, the potential of a family themselves taken away from him. And this book becomes that same sort of expression. They're one and the same, Tony and Edward, but one is experiencing in a fictional world and one is experiencing in a reality.
I think Edward figured out a way to write about himself and his experience using metaphor and using imagery to sort of hit it home to Susan.
The last time Edward saw Susan was 20 years ago, and she was pregnant at the time or had just had an abortion. So his imagined daughter looks just like the character of Susan, and his imagined wife also looks just like Amy Adams, the character of Susan.
Laura is the wife that Susan wishes she could be, and that she had been, because ultimately she loved Edward.
One of the things that I like is that I could have been essentially the child that Susan could have had.
The connection between the flashback world and the inner novel that Jake's character, Edward, has written is quite obvious if you're looking for it. For example, the character of Roberto Andes, who's played by Michael Shannon beautifully, I think. You know, he's a classic, the good guy in the American West. He's iconic. Andes represents the little voice that keeps saying, get them, go find them, do it, get revenge. That's what he says in the inner novel. In the outer world, he's saying, write the book, send it to Susan. Let her know that you managed to win.
What are we gonna do?
It's a question of how serious you are about seeing justice done.
Aaron Taylor-Johnson's performance for me in this film was a complete revelation.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You know you're supposed to stop when there's an accident, right?
Yeah, I know that.
And why didn't you stop then?
I thought he was perfect for the role, and he was really my very first choice.
Ray is a character that is a mirror of Edward's struggles throughout his whole life and then through the story. Edward wants to defeat this guy, wants to stand up to this guy. He's his worst enemy.
I know you.
What do you say, Ray?
You're crazy. You're making a big mistake.
This story, for me, is really about not throwing people away. You know, we live in a culture where we throw everything away. It's so disposable. We throw people away. And so Susan's at a moment in her life where she's achieved everything that she thought she should achieve from the outside of what her life should look like, yet she's dead inside. And then all of a sudden this novel arrives, and it reawakens a lot of things that she's already feeling. You know, it's really the last straw that frees her. And so that's the central theme, and to me, that's an important one. When you have someone important, someone that you love, don't throw them away, don't let them go. And to me, that was the thing really essentially about the story that spoke to me.
From an early stage, Tom and I had talked about the kind of photographic templates or signatures of each of the three sections of the film.
There were things I had to consider. Of course, we couldn't get confused. Which world are we in? And so in terms of grading, in terms of color, in terms of light, they had to look different, they had to feel different, yet at the same time, I wanted the film to have a cohesive look.
How do you make Tom Ford more beautiful? I guess you just add Seamus to the equation. You know, every shot that we've gotten has been glorious.
We'd always seen Susan's world as having a photographic symmetry and an absence of very vivid color.
Susan's world is very cold, so the color tones are cooler. They're bluer. Her life is a bit desaturated, except when there is color, it's garish. It's harsh against the desaturated nature of her world. When we have flashbacks, they're warmer. because they're richer for Susan. There's passion, there's something that she feels, and that's magnified through 20 years. The inner novel is also highly saturated and gritty, and the light is a little more harsh. It's either strong sunlight or it's the light from one bulb. So that also has a different feel.
We're very lucky to be shooting on film. So when we want to, we can push the granularity of the image, and that gives it real teeth, which I think is useful for that section of the story.
I'm worried about you. Just look at me for a second. Look at me.
I worked with Arianne Phillips on A Single Man, and I worked with Arianne Phillips on Nocturnal Animals. I think she's an incredible costume designer.
Costumes really are about creating character and setting often many subtle cues, story cues, for tone and place and emotion, as well as hints to the backstory or an interior life that a character has. One of the great things about working with Tom is that Tom is extremely detail-oriented, which is fantastic for me when it comes to costumes.
I can safely say I've never had a more beautiful wardrobe in any film I've ever done. The pieces were extremely well thought out and beautifully tailored.
Not only am I wearing Tom Ford design clothes, I'm actually wearing some of Tom Ford's own personal things. These studs are actually Tom's own. So they're sewn into the shirt because everyone is so scared of losing them.
I think Tom likes to use some of his personal things in some of his films. He literally puts himself into each of these characters. And I think because of that, it becomes so personal and it becomes so emotional. It really pays off because you feel the detail and everything has been meticulously figured out.
Because it's so clear in my mind, of course I'm very hands-on because I have a very clear vision in my head of what it should be.
It's really nice working with a director with such a finely tuned sense of taste as Tom is. I mean, he's a genius and famously in that regard, and it really shows in this film.
Nothing in my life is as beautiful as the world that Tom creates. When I first read the script, I thought Tom had done such a wonderful job bringing these elements of reality and story and past and present together, but it seemed sort of like an impossible task to put it into a film. And upon speaking to Tom, he had such a strong way of communicating his intent on how he was going to weave seamlessly, and I just wanted to be a part of what that was going to be.
Don't do this. You'll regret it, and you'll only hurt Edward in the end.
I put a lot of things in the film that maybe you wouldn't see the first time, a lot of moments where the outer story relates to the inner story and all the worlds start to converge. For example, when Susan is reading Edward's writing and doesn't think it's very good, she's lying on a red velvet sofa. In the inner novel, when he kills his wife and daughter, he puts them on a red velvet sofa because that's burned into his mind as a horrible moment where this woman didn't understand him.
I did not call you weak.
In the breakup scene, the two of them are fighting on the street and she walks away and leaves him. He's standing in front of a green Pontiac GTO. And so, of course, when the killer is written into his story, he writes the killer in this car. So, in a sense, that was burned into his mind. That horrible night she left him, and he's standing there in front of that car. Another point to notice is there's a moment where Ray's licking his fingernails on the top of a car. There's a tiny pink diamond ring on his little finger, which is clearly a little girl's ring. Because, of course, serial killers often keep a memento. There are lots of things like that, that if you're looking for them, feed this inner story that Edward has written and sent to Susan to basically say to her, this is what you did to me. This is what you did. You killed me. You destroyed me. You killed our family. You killed so much of me, but guess what? It took me 20 years But I prevailed. I stuck with what I believed in. I stuck with it. I wrote a novel. It's great. And by the way, through reading this novel, you're gonna fall in love with me all over again. But guess what? I'm over you. I'm over you. It's gone. A lot of people might look at the end of this film and think it was incredibly sad. Maybe there's something wrong with me because, yes, it's sad, but you know what? There are a lot of sad moments in life, but we can grow from them and develop from them. Whatever's going to happen to this woman, she's made a break with her life. The life that she's living that is not making her happy is finished. In that sense, reading this book, which was quite painful for her, was transformative.
Because of how Tom tells the story, I think everybody's going to take something different away from the film. It's one of those things where you see the film and then you get to talk about it for days and weeks to come. And those, for me, are the best kind of films, are the films that stay with you. And this film definitely stays with you.